Well, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, after several tense months of waiting, Spider-Man No Way Home is finally here, and it did not disappoint, showcasing a heartfelt story centered around Tom Holland's iteration of the iconic webhead. No Way Home served as a worthy conclusion to the Homecoming trilogy, answering many of the most pertinent fan questions, addressing some of the most common criticisms, and serving loyal fans in a just way. But while it answered many of the most prominent fan questions, it left us with many more that we will attempt to break down and analyze the ending of Spider-Man No Way Home, including the two post-credit scenes. This has left many avid fans like ourselves with a mountain of content to sift through, analyzing the remaining questions and where the MCU is going from here on out concerning Spider-Man. As for now though, as it pertains to Spider-Man, we are left to wonder where this leaves Peter Parker in the modern MCU. What does his story entail going forward, and what impacts did No Way Home and the events of this film have on his immediate and upcoming MCU projects and future? Well, without wasting any time, stick with us, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, and let's delve straight into an in-depth analysis of not only the ending of the movie and where it leaves Spider-Man, but take a look at the incredible maintenance of character continuity and delve into the details behind both the post-credit scenes and much more from Spider-Man No Way Home. So glad to finally be bringing you guys this video. Major spoilers ahead for the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. If you have not seen the film yet, please go do so before watching this video. As a brief reminder, we are giving away a Far From Home hot toy. The winner will be announced tomorrow, so this is your last chance to enter. All you have to do to enter to win the hot toy is like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the channel, as well as tell us down below which of the three Spider-Men you were most excited to see. Perhaps the most iconic trait that this film displays is finally exploring multiversal elements in depth. While the multiverse has been referenced in previous projects and served as a premier plot point of both What If and Loki, No Way Home showed Marvel fans that now there is no going back, pulling characters from both previously established Spider-Man franchises and cohesively integrating them into the narrative, with stunning respect and maintenance of character continuity and development from those previous franchises, for both Spider-Man involved as well as the villains. Each of the other two Spider-Men, as well as the respective villains, seems to have their motivations and origins intact, with incredible respect for their previously established journeys, especially given the magnitude of time that has passed for many of these characters. Both previous Spider-Men seem to be respected by Marvel Studios to a great degree, and their current states appear to be natural progressions of their character arcs from their previous franchises. Tobey Maguire and his iteration of MJ seem as if they have had continued with their troubles, but were still able to work things out in the long run, coming together in the end, just as was hinted at in the end of Spider-Man 3, as well as was a common staple for the Raimi trilogy, as Tobey Maguire's iteration of the character was able to retain the weight of his most diresome losses and learn from them, as he comments about them several points during the movie, including Uncle Ben and the loss of his best friend, Harry Osborn. His sacrificial move to save Tom Holland from killing Norman Osborn speaks directly to the character who was meticulously crafted by Sam Raimi all those years ago, and does the previous iterations of the character justice. Likewise, Andrew Garfield is still grieving the loss of Gwen Stacy at the hands of the Green Goblin from his universe, but he doesn't allow the grief and anger to continue consuming him, even though he alludes to tapping into his darker emotions for a time following Gwen's death, events that take place presumably after the credits roll from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. One interesting decision made by Watts and Marvel Studios was giving Andrew Garfield arguably more emotional weight and time than Tobey Maguire, in No Way Home that is, despite Maguire being widely regarded as the more beloved of the two previous iterations of the character. But this decision seems to have played out in the long run, as well as overall a good decision by Marvel, giving Andrew Garfield his time in the limelight as the character of the two that needed to be more focused on and progressed as a character overall. Andrew Garfield's ability to save MJ from falling in a fashion very similar to the night Gwen Stacy died was perhaps one of his most impactful emotional moments as a character overall, finally getting the opportunity to right this wrong, and finally learning from the mistake that cost Gwen her life. The emotion portrayed by Andrew Garfield in tandem with the context of why this moment meant so much to both the character and fans led to one of the most heartfelt scenes in the film, not to mention the history of superhero movies. Though the duo of Spider-Man were not the only characters to maintain their continuity after years of being absent from the public eye, as the villains also seemed to maintain the trajectory of their arcs developed in previous films. The Green Goblin in particular got to not only showcase the sinister, maniacal side, but will Willem Dafoe was given the opportunity to once again reprise Norman's good side as a helpless scientist, who was plagued by the goblin within his head. Seeing the dichotomy of Norman Osborn's struggle with the goblin once again ensured that he felt like the same character from the Raimi trilogy, facing the same challenges and perils, yet his ability to form a personal connection to Tom Holland's Peter Parker ensured that he served as a proper antagonist and not merely fanfare. Green Goblin at the end of this film is Tom Holland's Green Goblin, not just Tobey Maguire's, and Norman Osborn has most definitely left his stamp on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Likewise, Doc Ock also got to show the distinct duality between being controlled by his mechanical arms and being the brilliant scientist that we know all the way back from 2002 from Spider-Man 2. Peter's attempt to repair his inhibitor chip and awaken Otto for just a few brief moments highlights the depth of character from his original debut in the second Raimi film. Electro, who is often regarded as one of the weaker villains in the history of live-action Spider-Man projects, got his chance to not only shine, but redeem the pitfalls that his character suffered, in of course the court of public opinion, adding more depth to what we saw from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and creating a more fleshed out character who served more than a blind antagonist. Though Sandman and the Lizard got the least amount of screen time between the five, their character arcs still held firmly to their previous version, and Flint Marko even elected to assist Spider-Man in his first combat encounter with Electro, in accordance to the end of his journey from Spider-Man 3. The depth of the antagonists, especially in the earlier scenes, ensured that they served as more than just oppositions, but genuine continuations of their characters from previously established franchises. But while character arcs and journeys were maintained throughout the Multiversal Travelers, our own home MCU cast experienced their own share of drastic character shifts, trials, and tribulations. In this movie, Tom Holland genuinely became Spider-Man, as suffering is a part of the Spider-Man character, and suffer Tom Holland did. In the closing minutes of the film, the multiverse is starting to rupture irreparably, and as Doctor Strange attempts to seal the veil in order to prevent other multiversal nomads from arriving, he and Peter uncover a solution. If Doctor Strange can cast a spell that would make the world forget who Peter Parker is, then the rift will be sealed, leading to perhaps some of the most dire consequences that this specific Spider-Man or any Spider-Man has seen in their tenure as a superhero. Peter isn't just losing a loved one, he's losing everyone. This leaves him utterly alone, as nobody in the world knows who he is, including Peter's closest friends and most trusted ally, essentially leaving him to start anew without the support of his closest confidant, a key and integral part of the Spider-Man character. This directly severs his ties to several integral corners of the MCU, from his personal life to his life of superheroics and other aspects of his mere existence. So let's dive into just a few of them and how they currently stand in the MCU. What is the future of Spider-Man going forward? First and foremost, he is completely cut from ties with Stark Industries, which directly serves to address some of the most common criticisms of this iteration of the Spider-Man character. One of the most common critiques of Tom Holland's Spider-Man is how he seems reliant on technology, and while fans are divided on this assessment, this is not the topic of discussion that we will be delving into right at this moment. The important part that we are addressing is that this argument no longer seems to be valid with the character. Despite which side you as a viewer fall on, Tom Holland no longer even has access to technology that was widely served as the main plot point of contention in the aforementioned argument. He no longer can access any of Stark Technology's equipment. As many fans have called him before, he is no longer Iron Boy Jr., he is Spider-Man. His contacts and confidants within Stark Industries, including Happy and Pepper, now have no memory of Peter Parker or his connection to Tony Stark and the rest of Tony Stark's multi-billion-dollar corporation, leaving him without the assistance of Tony Stark's technology, and instead leaving him to take on more crude means of conducting his superheroics. We saw in the closing minutes that Peter had constructed his own new suit from scratch, reverting back to the days of homemade, hand-sewn suit to conduct his adventures as Spider-Man. This seems to not only be more closely akin to how he had to operate before Tony Stark recruited him to fight in the Civil War conflict, but some of the more traditional Spider-Man storylines that are widely beloved by fans. This assuredly means that the MCU Spider-Man is set to deviate away from the abundance of technology that many have found to be a prominent flaw within this iteration of the character, returning him to a more traditional life as a struggling photographer and night lighting superhero. Though this memory wipe did not only destroy his connection with Stark Industries, it also severed any connection that he still had. including that of his closest friends. We got a glimpse of a world wherein Ned and MJ not only have no recollection of who Peter Parker is, but they are both set to attend MIT together without him, and it appears as if he is letting them go without a fight. Despite promising to find them again and figuring out how to make them remember their adventures together, he now understands the consequences that his heroic double life has on his closest friends and loved ones, and it seems as if he is taking the noble steps to keep them out of his conflicts for the foreseeable future. Upon being reminded of the pain and turmoil that he had put them through by MJ's fading head injury, he makes the noble decision to finally step away and allow them to live their own lives in relative peace, without his superheroic conflicts drawing them into even more danger. Zendaya, the actress who portrays the MCU iteration of MJ, has gone on record stating that she famously sees this as the end of an era, and her return in future projects is as of yet uncertain. While we had originally taken this to hint at her character's eventual demise at the end of the film, it now seems as if Peter is set to leave his closest friends behind and move into a new chapter of life without them, perhaps even leaving the door open for the likes of Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy, or other prominent comic mainstays of Peter's social circle to make their MCU debuts. One curious note about the movie is that even though Harry Osborn was referenced on numerous occasions by both of the variant Spider-Man, he was never mentioned by name, and although Peter knows Norman Osborn by name, he might not make the immediate connection if the MCU's iteration of Harry Osborn is introduced in the coming years. Tom Holland has also advocated for none other than Timothée Chalamet to take on the role of Harry Osborn in the MCU, leaving us to wonder if his arrival might be on the near horizon, especially given Peter's recent shift in life circumstances. This essentially wipes the slate clean for Tom Holland's version of the character, breaking his ties with the Avengers and his friends and leaving him open to his new life as a burgeoning young adult superhero. One of the most common tendencies with the character of Peter Parker in most mediums is to center primarily around his teenage life, seeing as he is one of the most prevalent superheroes to have an array of interesting stories to tell from his youth. There are not many superheroes who have an abundance of stories from their younger years to tell, and while many fan favorites from the lineup of the Young Avengers are making their MCU debuts, none have the same level of notoriety as Spider-Man, who is one of the most popular superheroes of all time. Both of the previous franchises centered around a high school-aged Peter before their respective universes came to a cinematic end, and while Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man eventually aged into his college years and early adulthood, his franchise never moved past his early 20s until now. The MCU, however, has a unique position in the fact that their story is continually ongoing. This means that Tom Holland's Peter Parker will have ample time and space to grow into the adult version of Peter Parker that also has an abundance of storytelling content to draw from, while still taking advantage of his youthful years without milking them completely dry. Tom Holland has gone on record to state that he wants to take a step away from the role of the webhead for the time being, but has shown avid enthusiasm for taking on a mentorship role for more MCU newcomers. Perhaps this then leaves the youthful heroes of either Miles Morales, who was yet again referenced in this film, or the Young Avengers to take on the role of the young and inexperienced protege, and Tom Holland can be retained as a new mentor figure, bridging the eras of the MCU together and helping to create one cohesive story that doesn't feel too drastically disjointed. This of course looking to the far future for the character. While we as are yet uncertain as to where Peter Parker's story will progress from here, we have an abundance of clues and evidence. As is traditional for MCU properties, No Way Home left us with not one, but two post-credit scene teasers that are ripe with details regarding where his story will likely progress from here. The first post-credit scene gave us our first, and strangely enough, our only look at Eddie Brock's Venom, as played again by Tom Hardy from the Sony universe of the Spider-Man characters, and his presence left us with a few lingering questions. Many fans were actually quite disappointed by this post-credit scene. The first question comes as a direct result of the movie's internal logic, which states that the spell pulled forward individuals who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, regardless of their universe of origin, and that this knowledge was the common thread that connected the multiversal travelers. It does not appear as if Eddie Brock knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. As he talks to the bartender, it seems clear of this. In the scene, it even seems possible that this may be the first time that he's hearing the name Spider-Man. He states that he should talk to, quote, this Spider-Man guy, leaving us to wonder how he was pulled through the multiverse if he didn't know who Peter Parker was, or that he lives a dual life as our favorite wall crawler. One particularly prominent theory is that it is not in fact Eddie Brock who knows of Peter's true identity, but instead it's Venom. In the closing moments of Let There Be Carnage, Venom states that symbiotes have a collection of shared knowledge from across the cosmos, and we have theorized before that symbiotes can even communicate across universes, though at the very least, it has been seemingly confirmed that they can pull a collective of knowledge and information together. What are we getting at? If, for example, Venom is able to communicate with the iteration of the symbiote from the Raimi era and Raimi universe with Tobey Maguire, then he would know that Spider-Man and Peter Parker are one and the same, despite never having met an iteration of either character from his home universe. This could explain why Tom Hardy was pulled into the MCU, and it could mean that it wasn't in fact Eddie Brock that was pulled through the multiverse, it was instead Venom. But since the duo inhabit the same body, Brock was simply pulled along for the ride, but that it was Venom that knew that Spider-Man was Peter Parker. We also see that Venom left a sample of the symbiote in the MCU, leaving it to wander the Prime timeline and potentially be the catalyst for Venom's cast of symbiotic characters to make their MCU debuts in the coming years, being connected to the Sony version of the character. In the closing moments of the film, we got a glimpse at Peter's dark side and his ability to lose control of his emotional state as he nearly beat Norman Osborn to the brink of death in one of the most visceral fights that we've seen from the MCU's iteration of the Webhead. Seeing this Peter, who already has pent-up rage from losing everything he knows, take on the symbiote and let it drive his anger even further could make for an incredibly intriguing storyline, and get to watch this version of Spider-Man delve into the dark side. He not only lost Aunt May to the Green Goblin, but everyone he knew and has ever known. His closest friends no longer recognize or remember him, watching them pursue futures at MIT without him, and he has lost his connection to not only Happy Hogan and what remains of Tony Stark's legacy, but everyone he's ever known. This could potentially fuel a dark descent that may draw Peter into a conflict with other heroes from across the MCU, and might lead to another Civil War type of story, wherein Peter's story comes full circle and crafts an incredibly engaging storyline for not only himself, but those who are forced to fight against him. However, thanks to the rules and regulations established by the Venom universe, we know the logic by which the symbiote operates, and these rules seem to hint that there will be another symbiotic antagonist villain appear before Tom Holland dons the iconic black suit. The logic behind this theory is that the symbiote cannot survive without a host for very long, and seeing as the bartender and the people in the bar were speaking Spanish, it seems logical that the symbiote is likely in a Central or South American country, while Peter is still obviously in New York City. If the symbiote has to bond with a host to survive, then we may see a new host take on the symbiote before it ever reaches New York, and this host could serve as a new antagonist for someone within the MCU before the black suit reaches Peter. The second post-credit scene was not simply a scene, but was a direct teaser trailer for Multiverse of Madness, similarly to how Marvel released an Avengers promo as the second post-credit scene of Captain America: The First Avenger. In this teaser, there's so much to unpack, and though we'll be giving a rundown of the most prominent details as of now, we will also dissect this footage in depth and give far more intricate analysis in coming days. Rest assured though, we're going to break down everything we saw of our first viewing. We got to see that Wanda does not immediately seem to be the direct instigator of many of these problems like we had previously thought, as it was reported that Scarlet Witch would be the main antagonist of Multiverse of Madness, and the catalyst for many of the monsters coming through the multiverse, although we don't get a clear glimpse of her into her supposed antagonistic role that has been rumored for months now. But more on that in a moment. Instead, Doctor Strange actively seeks her out in order to recruit her on his mission, and though she seems reluctant at first, we see a later shot of her in full Scarlet Witch attire, apparently helping the best that she can, though this may again be a deliberate misdirect by Marvel Studios, which we believe here at the channel that it is. There is a supposed leak that details what we can expect from this scene, though this leak as of yet unconfirmed and has not been verified, so take this next claim with a soft spoiler warning. The alleged leak details a scene in which Doctor Strange discovers that Wanda is intentionally sending monsters across the multiverse, and this scene leads to a confrontation where Strange and Wanda are drawn into combat with one another. According to the leak, Strange discovers that he is dreadfully outmatched by the full might of the now awakened Scarlet Witch, and is drawn further into desperation for the remainder of the film. Though Wanda's motivation motivation for sending creatures across the multiverse is unclear, there are a few prevailing theories, the most intriguing of which states that since Wanda is what is known as a Nexus being, she cannot cross between universes at will. We have conducted a full breakdown of what exactly a Nexus being is previously on the channel, and if you are interested in a more in-depth explanation, we encourage you to check that video out, as it may be a major prominent plot point in Multiverse of Madness. But the most pertinent detail as of now, however, is that Nexus beings are pillars of their reality and help to maintain the stability of the universe that they originally reside in. If Wanda believes that her children are lost in the multiverse, as was hinted in the closing minutes of WandaVision, then she may be relegated to sending searchers throughout the multiverse in order to save her children, though her definition of saving them may entail pulling them from their home realities in a move of desperation that cements her as the antagonist of the film. One other rumor that we've been hearing seems to be confirmed in this footage as well, as there was a persistent rumor that America Chavez would not only make her debut, but would be actively chased or followed through the multiverse. And though we do not get to see her face, we do get our first look at America Chavez's iconic jacket, confirming her involvement and giving us our first glimpse at the iconic character. In the comics, Chavez is an incredibly powerful hero who not only possesses enchanted physical characteristics, but the unique ability to traverse the multiverse and leap between dimensions with ease, which could directly inform the role that she is set to play in Multiverse of Madness. This could mean that Wanda might be actively hunting America Chavez through her intermediaries in order to force her assistance into finding her lost children. Though again, since she is limited to her home universe, she is resorting to using proxy soldiers to do her work and search for her children for her, which could directly cause Doctor Strange to jump into action and traverse the multiverse in order to save Chavez, leading to the dire consequences that were hinted at throughout the trailer. One of the consequences in question could even result in the destruction of entire timelines. Based on the evidence given in the trailer, we got a clear look at a reality that seems to be dissolving with the same effects that we saw in What If, which seems directly indicative of a dying timeline. In episode 4 of What If, we are introduced to a character known as Strange Supreme, who dooms his universe on his quest for power in order to save Christine Palmer's life. As his universe crumbles, we see the environment around him melt into tendrils of black ink, which we again see in this footage, indicating the death of a timeline in reality. This could directly confirm that the universe that Strange is currently inhabiting is actively dying and is in the midst of falling apart completely, though there is no confirmation that this is the primary MCU reality that Doctor Strange is currently in. If Doctor Strange is truly set to traverse different dimensions and explore alternate timelines across the multiverse, then this might not be his home timeline that is collapsing, merely a reality that looks eerily similar and might be sacrificed in order to build the stakes of the coming conflict. In addition to portraying Doctor Strange, it appears as if Benedict Cumberbatch is also set to reprise his role as Strange Supreme, who is now making his live-action MCU debut. One interesting side note to mention is that this continues the odd precedent wherein Benedict Cumberbatch plays both the principal protagonist and antagonist of a Doctor Strange film, seeing as he provided the voice and motion capture for Dormammu in his first solo outing. And while this does not have any prominent story-related stakes, it's a fun side detail to address nonetheless. The last we saw of Strange Supreme, he was watching over the pocket dimension containing Infinity Ultron, and it seems as if he may have abandoned his post, if this is again the same evil Strange, which could potentially allow for Ultron's eventual return at some point down the line. And given the level of calamity that he was able to cause in What If, his return would most certainly spell dire consequences for the rest of the MCU. Alongside the resurgence of Strange Supreme and Christine Palmer, Baron Mordo also makes a reappearance, marking his first MCU outing since 2016, and he states that the most dire threat to the multiverse is none other than Dr. Stephen Strange. This leaves a layer of ambiguity, as we do not know if he is referring to our Doctor Strange or Strange Supreme, seeing as each of them has caused drastic multiversal rifts and dire consequences in some of Marvel's most recent projects. We have the calamity that Doctor Strange has already caused, conducting the spell that drastically damaged the fabric of the universe in Spider-Man No Way Home. And the Multiverse of Madness will see him delve even deeper into this concept, But we have also seen Strange Supreme succumb to his own ambitions and doom the inhabitants of his home universe as a direct result of his arrogance. If Mordo was set to take on an antagonistic role as was foreshadowed in the first Doctor Strange, then his motivation would make sense in merely trying to preserve the fabric of the multiverse, which would maintain character consistency and make for yet another compelling storyline. While there was a wide array of Easter eggs, hints, and clues as to what comes next, rest assured that we will take a deep dive into the most intricate details of the film in the coming days and weeks. So be sure to stay tuned for more analytical Spider-Man and Doctor Strange content. Spider-Man No Way Home was a deeply emotional experience for myself. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies are what built me as a superhero fan. Those are the movies that I grew up with, and I'm sure many of you grew up with. And getting to see Andrew Garfield get his time in the limelight was absolutely spectacular, as I think he personally stole the show out of the three Spider-Men, at least in the final battle, that is. Also, getting to see the massive character progression that Tom Holland's Spider-Man went through was a great thing to see live out on screen. This film perfectly shows the end of a saga and the beginning of a new one. I've never seen a film pull something off like that before. A perfect end and a perfect beginning to what comes next. The character of Spider-Man, all three of them, means so much to me, as I'm sure it means so much to you guys as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. And I hope to keep you guys entertained for many more weeks to come with more Spider-Man No Way Home content. As despite this video approaching 30 minutes long, we still have way more to unpack here. So if you have any questions or comments you have for Spider-Man No Way Home that you would like us to take a deep dive into, please leave them in the comments down below. Again, also tomorrow we will be announcing the winner of the hot toy figure giveaway. Anyway guys, I've been waiting a year to ask this question. What did you think of Spider-Man No Way Home? What was your favorite moment from the film? And which of the three Spider-Men were you the most excited to see? Thank you as always so much for watching. Thank you so much for putting up with me for around 30 minutes. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team. Have a great day, and I hope to see you in the next video.